reports. This is Chris live in central Pennsylvania. Let me find a spot where the sun sits a little bit better there. I can't really, well, here we go. There we go. Welcome back to the program. Yeah. Well, the latest salvo in the terrified demon rat assault to deny loyal Americans their opportunity to select their president has continued. The latest salvo being fired in the liberal state of Maine in northeastern United States. Now, why not let the people decide about Donald Trump? Now, that's a question that even the New York Times has asked today in an op-ed that appeared in today's New York Times, saying this nonsense, my words, not theirs, this nonsense needs to stop. Let the people decide. That's the bottom line here. Now, this op-ed in the New York Times actually goes on to talk about the ambiguity in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment and how it's not applicable for this situation. So, Maine Secretary of State Sheena Bellows, a Democrat, released a 34-page ruling Thursday evening stating that Donald Trump's primary election petition is invalid in the state of Maine. This is what she said. I find the declaration on his candidate form is false because he's not qualified to hold office of the president under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. She wrote her decision. Now, never mind the fact that she's not qualified to actually adjudicate this particular issue. Yes, it is her job as Secretary of State to control the ballot in Maine, but she cannot make a judicial decision by fiat. Donald Trump has never been convicted of insurrection. He's never been charged with insurrection. And the only competent authorities that could actually charge him under the 14th Amendment would be Congress or a competent federal court, not a state Secretary of State, not a state Supreme Court. These are jurisdictions that have no jurisdictions whatsoever. And one of the viewers has popped in here who lives in Maine. Your state is rogue and out of control. These are people undermining the republic. This is treasonous behavior. This is treasonous political behavior meant to destroy the events of 2024, to continue this globalist agenda that is destroying the world. Utter nonsense. Now, while this moron in Maine, who is incapable of reading the Constitution, is functionally illiterate, exceeds her writ, violates the rule of law, while this continues in Maine. In California last night, California certified Donald Trump to be on the ballot. Yep. On the March 5th presidential primary in California, Donald Trump was kept on the ballot. This lunacy that's taking place in liberal states like formerly conservative Colorado and always leftist Maine is out of control. Now, the situation in Colorado has been stayed because, of course, the cowardly decision by a corrupt Democrat Supreme Court in Colorado, which has no jurisdiction to adjudicate this issue, that decision, they cowardly placed in their decision the pressure valve to release the pressure so they'd be off the hook by saying that if they appealed it, then it would be stayed. Well, of course it's going to be appealed. The Republican Party in Colorado has already appealed this to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court needs to step in on this issue. Number one, the 14th Amendment Section 3 is not applicable here. And the Colorado Supreme Court has no jurisdiction, nor does Sheena Bellows. This is what happens when arrogant, attention-seeking nobodies try to make a name for themselves. Nobody heard of Sheena Bellows before last night. Now the entire world knows her name. And she's probably reveling in the attention. Unbelievable. This is unbelievable. So, this is what Section 3 of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution specifically says. Now remember, this amendment was enacted while the southern states that were in rebellion could not vote because they had not been readmitted to the Union in full good faith and standing. So this was an amendment passed while these states were still dorking around. And the northern states, under the control of Republicans, passed the 14th Amendment to ensure citizenship to those born in the United States, former slaves in particular. Yeah, so this is specifically what Section 3 says. It was designed to prevent former Confederates who had served in the House and Senate from returning to those positions, or former postmasters and appointed officers in the federal government to return to those positions. In other words, keep them out so that they wouldn't undermine the republic again. This is verbatim. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress, or elector of president. The elector of president are those who vote in the Electoral College, and vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress, or as an officer in the United States, or as a member of any state legislature. Ladies and gentlemen, the president is not a member of the Senate, is not a member of the House of Representatives, is not an appointed officer of the U.S. government. The president is an elected citizen, at least 35 years of age, natural-born U.S. citizen. That's what the president is. And this garbage is not legitimate. It has no standing under the rule of law. Yeah, now in this op-ed in the New York Times, the authors of the New York Times said the Supreme Court should take the case and reverse the Colorado Supreme Court ruling, and do so for the very reasons cited by the Colorado judges. Exactly. These idiots didn't even realize they set up their own, well, they just did this to mess with the election. According to the Colorado court, itself quoting an earlier unrelated case, Section 3 should be interpreted in light of the objectives sought to be achieved and the mischief to be avoided. Well, the mischief here is the Colorado Supreme Court's interjection into a federal process undermining the Constitution. And in this case, we're talking about, the reason I went live today, is the mischief under the Constitution created by an egotistical, maniacal, attention-seeking demon rat from Maine, who no one ever heard of before last night. Sheena Bellows now is public enemy number one for loyal Americans. Another attempt to undermine the rule of law in this country. This continues unabated. It is out of control, folks. Now, here's the bottom line here. Provided the Supreme Court actually does its job, which is to ensure that the laws of this land are in accord with the Constitution. It hasn't always done that. For instance, in the Plessy versus Ferguson decision of 1898 from Louisiana, the Supreme Court ruled that the separate but equal concept, apartheid, essentially, was okay. Of course, that's nonsense. There is no such thing as separate but equal. That's what they're seeking today. Separate but equal, demonizing majority Americans and separating us. You don't see us on commercials anymore. You don't see us in television programs. You don't see us promoted in idiotic race hustling magazines like Sports Illustrated, completely obliterating the 235 million white Americans in this country. Yeah. Separate but equal is the doctrine they're returning to. And that's essentially what's happening. We have an out of control Supreme Court when it comes to congressional districting, dictating that Georgia and Mississippi create majority black districts by artificially changing the boundaries, not where people live, just to create districts to ensure that there are black representatives in Congress. Not only is it unconstitutional, it's racist. And why would you do that for 12% of the population? That's just ludicrous. In places where black Americans want to vote for a black person, they can do so. Simple as that. South Carolina has a significantly large black population. There you go. Anyway, the point here is that this nonsense needs to stop forthwith. This is a decision, this is intentional to undermine the candidacy of a candidate for president of the United States. It's no different than the events of 2016 when one party lied about what happened and blamed the other party when they actually engaged in it. And the same thing happened in 2020 when one party lied about events and tried to paint the other party as having participated in it. It's funny how the mainstream media never talks about the truth. For instance, just the other day, this whole thing with this Biden's daughter's diary came up. 2 people convicted of theft in that diary. It's abandoned property. How can you be convicted of theft for abandoned property? Someone left property and refused to collect it. It's abandoned. It's yours to claim. Yet they were convicted of that crime. And that is the basis for going after people. What they failed to mention is that those people tried to sell that diary to the Trump campaign. And the Trump campaign said, no, we're not getting involved in that. No, thank you. No, thank you. Take it to the FBI. There's nothing to do with us. Funny how the media never talks about those sorts of things. Sheena Bellows. Well, she's made a name for herself, the failed senatorial candidate who got shellacked by Susan Collins. Not exactly a conservative Susan Collins, but she got shellacked. Nearly 4 times as many votes for Collins when she ran against her. This is a failed politician who is in an office that is apparently thinks it has authority that it doesn't have. The ability to limit who goes on the ballot. This is a disgrace. Disgrace. This republic is under assault each and every day by lawfare and by criminal actions. by the Democratic Party in particular and rhinos that help them. America's on life support, folks. And when the last bastion of freedom falls, it's all over for the world. There's no freedom in South Africa where they silence your speech and they allow people to attack you based on your skin color. There's no freedom in Europe, which is gone. Germany isn't German. It's been turned over to a cabal of people from all over the world who have no respect for German mores, values, and norms, or language and culture. The same things happen in the United Kingdom. And of course, the leftists will tell us that the UK is a land of immigration. It's always been the case. The Celts came, then the Angles, the Saxons, the Utes, and of course the Vikings, the Norwegians came, and then the Romans came, and then the Normans came. Well, the Romans came before the Vikings. I should get that order correct. Yeah, okay. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the United Kingdom, a country formed since the 13th century, with English as its language, and the Magna Carta as its guidestone. That's gone. That's completely gone. You have a rogue, out-of-control government in the United Kingdom that arbitrarily passes public order laws preventing people from demonstrating, ostensibly meant to prevent eco-terrorists from blocking traffic or hanging off of bridges and disrupting life, but used arbitrarily against anyone who's an opponent of the state. The same thing is happening all over the world, folks. Look at Melbourne, where they assaulted and arrested people who were lawfully protesting during the lockdown. Anyway, this is nonsense. So, last night, another victory for Trump as the California Secretary of State puts him on the ballot, which is supposed to do for the March 5th primary in the state of California. However, I don't want to say setback, but a rogue, out-of-control, lawless action taking place in the state of Maine, a state that most people outside America probably never even heard of. Probably never even heard of Maine. Don't even know the capital. Yikes. Well, Sheena Bellows has made a name for herself. She's cut her teeth like many demon rats who seek attention by flaunting and flouting the law. Yep, that's what's happened here in Maine. These people really are either functionally illiterate or just demonically possessed. Take your pick. They're one of the two. Anyway, folks, there's a take on this morning's developments when it comes to election interference in 2024. There you have it. That's what's happening as we see rogue, out of control secretaries of state for states in the union making decisions in violation of law. Once again, Sheena Bellows in a 34-page decision. I'm shocked she can write 34 pages given she appears to be functionally illiterate. Or maybe she just has no cognitive reasoning capability to read the 14th Amendment, to understand the Constitution. 34 pages. Total nonsense. Now, one of the appeals for her to hear this case, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, was from an idiot in Maine who said that, well, Donald Trump is disqualified from running because you can only be president twice, and he claims he won the last time. Donald Trump can claim all he wants, but he was never seated and sworn in for that office. So it doesn't matter what Donald Trump claimed. He didn't serve a second term. That's the stupidity that was before this Secretary of State, Sheena Bellows. Supreme Court needs to get busy on this to make a decision very quickly in January, or this country will descend into chaos. Over 400 million firearms, over 23 million people with military experience, over 11 million combat veterans, 800,000 law enforcement officers, 3,000 miles from one coast to the other, 2,200 miles from one north to south. It's not going to go well for these people and their nonsense. Well, now we know who Sheena Bellows is. Now we know who Sheena Bellows is. She's vile and repulsive. And she's a lawless, out-of-control autocrat. A tin pot dictator without legal authority to take action. And she's disenfranchised the entire state of Maine. Disenfranchised the entire state of Maine. Hey folks, if you're not a subscriber, why don't you hit that subscription button. Be sure to give us a comment and hopefully a like if you don't mind. And we'll catch you on the news broadcast right here on Chris Wyatt Reports. Have a lovely day. I am. It's the first time I've seen the sun in a week. It's been gray, overcast, and rainy. And for once, maybe my solar panels will generate some kilowatt hours. Have a good day. Happy New Year, everyone.